Good evening, viewers and listeners, and welcome to this another edition of the program Serving the People, brought to you courtesy the Democratic Republican Party, the DRP. I'm your host, Mrs. Anissa Batiste, and please let us start with a word of prayer. Dear Father in heaven, please grant unto me your blessing as I speak the truth to the people, that they may understand what good governance is all about, even the respect for their rights and freedoms which are God-given. Bless me as I speak to the people, and may they be enlightened and inspired. In Jesus' name, amen. And now, dear viewers, let me remind you that if you wish to contact me and to contact the DRP, you may call telephone number 528-1015. That's 528-1015. Or you may also call 456-6257. 456-6257. Now, let me apologize for the absence 1 or 2 weeks ago of this program. I was out of state and we had some challenges getting the program aired while I was out. But I'm back now and back with you to continue to serve you. In this evening's program, I am going to explain a recent issue that has arisen in the public concerning me, Anissa Batiste, to you. You may have seen in the local newspapers, in particular in the Searchlight newspaper of Tuesday, October 9th, 2012, a story called Anissa Batiste Attorneys Withdraw Services Left in the Cold. And on the front page there, you would have seen a photograph of myself and my mother. And this story continued on page 3. Yes, it continued on page 3 at the top thereof, where you see photos of the 3 main lawyers involved in the matter. And the story is done by Mr. Kenton Chance. You also see a photo of me. I have to explain this matter to you because it has a lot of significance for what we talk about here in the DRP when we talk about the importance of respect for rights and freedoms of all of the people. And respect for the rights and freedoms of all of the people, regardless of the different things that may distinguish us, whether it be race, gender, status in society, and even political party support. This issue that has arisen concerning me leaves much to be desired, where the position of the New Democratic Party supporters in positions of legal representation is concerned. And you will see why I say this as I explain as I go along. For those of you who would have read the story, you would have come to understand that the lawyers who were representing me in a case I have before the court, where I had filed a suit claiming breach of my constitutional freedom by the Public Service Commission and the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Tourism and the Attorney General. I had filed a suit against them after the Public Service Commission had issued me with 16 charges of misconduct back in 2010 when I was employed at the Ministry of Tourism as a public servant. Without going into the issue of the case itself, even as it is still before the court, you all would have heard that all the charges that were laid against me had somehow to do with comments that I had made during and after the referendum election, or that period leading up to the referendum election. Well, after these charges were laid against me and certain other action had been taken against me, like I had been interdicted from my duties at the Ministry of Tourism and put on half pay, lawyers came forward to represent me in the case that I was filing against the government. Namely, Mr. Keith Scotland of Trinidad and Tobago, Maya Eustace of Cato and Cato Chambers, and Mr. Bertram E. Comijong, and to another extent, his daughter, Miss Mira Comijong. This matter had been going on for some time in the court, and October 8th and 9th were new trial dates for the matter, for the case? Well, I was in the United States of America for a little bit, and when I returned home from the US, I knew that I had to attend a meeting with these three of the lawyers I just called, whose names I just called. I was advised by Miss Eustace via email on the 29th of September while I was in the US that the trial dates were coming up and that it would be prudent for us to meet. I had absolutely no idea what the meeting was about. I turned up for that meeting on Thursday the 4th of October. That's just one working day before the trial date, because the trial date is on Monday the 8th, and Thursday the 4th is when I was called to that meeting. So all I had was Friday the 5th before the weekend and before the trial date on Monday. And when I arrived at that meeting, I was pretty much informed by these lawyers, primarily Mr. Bertram E. Commijon QC and Miss Maya Eustace, who were the ones doing the talking. Miss Mira Commijon said nothing. I was advised by both of them of their decision to withdraw their legal services from me. It is very important to understand that I was given certain reasons orally in that meeting, which I have no fear to repeat here on the television for you, because you ought to know the truth about what really happened. At the end of the meeting, however, I was handed a letter from Miss Eustace and signed by herself and the other lawyers, including signed by her on behalf of Mr. Keith Scotland, who is in Trinidad, a letter which proposed to give a summary or a précis of the reasons why they were requesting release from legal representation from me. What is notable is that the one reason given in writing in her letter is not the only reason that was given to me orally in that meeting. I have to let you know this. The first thing Mr. Commijon said to me in that meeting were, and I am quoting his words, "We are NDP lawyers. We work for the NDP." End of quote. And he went on to subsequently explain that he and the Honorable Annie Eustace had had a friendship for a very long time. And pretty much the long and short of it was that, look, you, Anissa Baptiste, are no longer with the NDP. You no longer support Mr. Eustace of the NDP. I cannot support you anymore in legal representation on your matter. That is the first reason that was given to me by Mr. Commijon. And I quoted his words for you. "We are NDP lawyers. We work for the NDP." Subsequently, well, I opposed it by saying I never knew when they took up the matter to represent me that they were doing it because they support the NDP politically. I understood that their support was based on their belief that my constitutional freedom of expression was being infringed upon, and that they did not agree, like me, with the decision that the Public Service Commission had taken against me. This was my understanding. At that time when I said that, Miss Maya Eustace interjected and pretty much separated herself from the comments of Mr. Commijon, and she confirmed this in a telephone conversation to me the next day, that she had separated herself from the comments of Mr. Commijon QC. In other words, Miss Eustace is saying to me, it is true that she did not take up the case because of support for the NDP when she did it. As a matter of fact, I reminded her in that meeting that when she decided to represent me on the case pro bono or for free, it was her offer, not my request, and she did it because she felt that it was a matter of such importance constitutionally, and that she was so incensed or angry, upset with the way that I was being treated as a public servant, as a young black woman, etc. These are the things that I was led to believe. So it was very shocking to me to hear a senior lawyer in this country precede or basically set the tone of his reasons for no longer wanting to represent a client in a constitutional matter. He basically set the tone of his reasons by declaring his political stance. What does the political support of a lawyer have to do with representing a client whose constitutional right or freedom has been infringed upon? Is this what we have come to in this country, where the protection of the rights and freedoms of the people and pursuit of justice, where it is felt that those rights and freedoms have been infringed upon, is now subject to the condition of having the same political support of the lawyer in question. That is unacceptable, my dear people. A person's right and freedoms protection and pursuit of justice, whenever that right and freedom protection is infringed upon or breached, should not be subject to who the person supports politically. Yet this is essentially what that lawyer was saying to me on that day. However, they went on to give other reasons. They did not write in the letter that it was because Mr. Commission, that is, it was because he is an NDP lawyer, to quote him, or he works for the NDP, why he couldn't support me anymore. Oh no, it would not be wise to write that in a letter. But Anissa Batista is not afraid to tell the nation that that is what was told to her, because that is the truth. But in the letter, Mr. Commission and the other lawyers cite what they claim to be behavior on my part which showed that I had no confidence in them as a legal team. I am going to read to you the section of the letter. It is the second paragraph. It says, and I quote, "The tenor of your statement in the press with respect to Mr. Commission QC's interpretation of the Constitution of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, including your characterization of him or his said interpretation as, quote, stupid, inter alia," that means, among other things, "transcends to us all as your lawyers in what is a constitutional claim. Those statements give the portrayal that you have lost all confidence in us, and in the circumstances, our ability to perform has been compromised." End of quote. Here the lawyers are saying to me that statements I made in the press referring to Mr. Commission's interpretation of the Constitution as stupid, they say, shows that I no longer had confidence in him nor in the whole legal team. They say it transcends to us all as your lawyers, and they claim my statements portray that I've lost confidence in them, and therefore they are in a position of compromise. Their ability to perform has been compromised. What they do not tell you, my dear people, what they do not put in this letter, and what they do not indicate even in their affidavit to the court on Monday morning seeking release from the record as my lawyers, they do not indicate that I did not just like some crazy woman write an article in the newspaper speaking to Mr. Commission. Mr. Commission QC is the first one who wrote a piece in the paper called "Constitution Never Declared Supreme in Relation to Bylaws of Any NGO." It was published on or about the 11th of May of this year, and I responded to the things he said, the claims he made against me and my religious brethren. I responded to him, showing why I disagreed with him. In Mr. Commission's article, he did several things. He defended Mr. Eustace's policy, claiming that my claim that the policy was unconstitutional and against my religious right under the Constitution, he basically says I was wrong. He gives this whole argument that the NDP is an NGO or a non-governmental organization, and that a non-governmental organization has the right to regulate itself by its bylaws, and you can't claim that its bylaws are unconstitutional. Mr. Commission also went on to claim that Mr. Eustace's policy was meant, as it were, to protect, and I'm going to quote him now, "What Ms. Batiste said Mr. Eustace dictated does not with respect contravene any rights protected by the Constitution, for even in a public law sense, it could be considered as reasonably necessary for protecting the rights and freedoms of other persons, including the right to observe and practice any religion without the unsolicited intervention of member of any other religion." So Mr. Comijong is here saying that Mr. Eustace's policy was to protect persons who want to practice their religion without unsolicited intervention. Now, I had dealt with this in another program when Mr. Parnell Campbell tried to claim that by criticizing a religious teaching, it meant you were creating unsolicited intervention into a person's practice of their religion. He said, and I quote, "Thus, even in a public law context, it may be argued that Mr. Eustace's so-called diktat could be defended under Section 9, subsection 5, paragraph B, even though it was not strictly intended to protect the rights and freedoms of the groups being assailed by Miss Baptiste and her followers." End of quote. So this man, Mr. Comijong QC, accuses Miss Baptiste and her followers. He said, "I don't have any followers, I have brethren in a church." But he accuses us of assailing the rights and freedoms of other religious groups. Do you know what the meaning of the word assail is? If you look it up, it means to violently attack. We are not assailing anybody's rights and freedoms. How could you accuse me of that? In this country, we have different religions. And different religions, they have their crusades, they have their radio programs, they have their television programs, some of them write in the newspapers. And because of having different doctrinal positions, they each are critical of each other's doctrines. When the Seventh-day Adventists go in their crusades and they preach about why Sunday keeping is wrong and why the Sabbath is the seventh day, and they preach about leaving Babylon and what the Bible has to say about the mark of the beast and the history of the Roman Catholic Church changing the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday, they are being critical of those religions who go to church on Sunday, who follow that practice. To be critical of a religious teaching does not mean that you are assailing the person's right and freedom to practice their religion. So for Mr. Bertram Comijong QC to accuse me, a Thusia Seventh-day Adventist, and my brethren, when we engage in being critical of religious teachings, to accuse us of contravening that section of the Constitution that says, in the practice of your religion, you must not infringe upon another person's practice. That in itself is wrong. And when I answered him in my letter on the 18th, 1 week after his first publication, I was simply showing that what he is saying is nonsense. Because you cannot accuse a person who engages in criticism of a religious teaching, you cannot accuse them of breaching the Constitution. Because to criticize a religious teaching does not constitute interfering with another person's ability to practice their religion. Adventists and evangelicals differ all the time on the Sabbath issue. Evangelicals and Rastas might differ all the time on the issue of Jesus and Selassie. But does that stop evangelicals from practicing? Does that stop Rastas from practicing? Does that intervene with the practice of the religion of Sunday keepers, the fact that Saturday keepers or Sabbath keepers criticize their teaching? Of course not. This is the kind of nonsense that this senior lawyer, truth be told, was spewing in his article in the paper. And he was writing it about me, Anissa Baptiste, who he was representing. When I, in defense of myself, and rightly so, replied, all of a sudden, these lawyers are now telling me 5 months later that because of my reply, it showed I had no confidence in them, and that's why they're dropping the case. Nothing could be more ridiculous. Why wait until 5 months after you see a response to your article which you claim shows I had no confidence? Why wait until 5 months after, 1 working day before my trial date, to come and tell me in a meeting that this is the reason why you can't represent me any longer? Why didn't you call me up the day when you saw the article and said, well, look, Miss Baptiste, I disagree with you. I don't like what you said about me. I can't represent you any longer. How unprofessional, how insensitive, how wicked. Because you certainly know I am unemployed. You certainly know I have just 1 day left, if even I were to think about finding another lawyer. And you would so insensitively and so unprofessionally wait until one working day before my trial date to come and tell me, we're dropping your case, we can't represent you anymore. And then have the audacity at the beginning, Mr. Commissioner QC, to tell me, you are an NDP lawyer, you work for the NDP. My dear people, this development is truly unfortunate. But it is not so much because I was put in that position, because let me tell you, thank God, I went to the court Monday morning and I made representation for myself before the judge and indicated to her that I was only informed on Thursday of the lawyer's decision to release themselves from the case, and that if it pleased her and the court, I would like to get another date. And the judge heard my oral application and she granted my application for an adjournment to a date to be fixed by the registrar, hopefully in the next law term. I am truly grateful that this mercy was extended to me. God knows under these circumstances I could not do better. But I am saying these things to you, I'm explaining these things to you because you ought to know the truth about what really happened. Let nobody give you the impression that Anissa Batiste was just crazily writing these things about Mr. Commissioner, because this is what was done essentially when the lawyers choose to pick out certain of my words from my article and put it in the affidavit before the court to say, well, this is the reason why we can't represent her anymore, because these are the things she said about lead counsel, and these things basically are unacceptable and we have irreconcilable differences. Those are the grounds that the lawyers claim they have under which they can no longer go forward. Well, I never told them that I had any irreconcilable differences with them. Those so-called irreconcilable differences were their creation. I never felt that even though I disagreed with Mr. Commissioner on his interpretation of the Constitution with respect to Mr. Eustace's policy, I never felt it meant he could no longer represent me on the issue, which is a separate issue of the claim I had and I have before the court against the Public Service Commission and their treatment of me as a public servant in 2010. I was not the one who called them and said, well, I no longer want you to work for me because I'm no longer with the NDP. I no longer support Mr. Eustace as leader of the NDP. I was not the one who did that. I was mature enough to think that they were mature enough to separate their political party support from their professional work as lawyers in representing a client who they said they believed had grounds for wanting to sue the Public Service Commission for the infringement of her rights and freedoms, so claimed. I am saying to you, my dear viewers, my dear listeners, we live in a country where partisan political interference is causing people to hurt a lot. Both government and opposition supporters, and in this case, the lawyer who told me that his political support, that's what he told me at the beginning of the meeting. That's what he preceded his reasons with. Basically telling me that, well, you're not with the NDP anymore. You can't expect me to represent you still. Me and Mr. Eustace are friends from a long time. I am an NDP lawyer. I work for the NDP. Where are we in a country when this is what the rights and the freedoms of the people have come to? When you have a senior lawyer claiming he supports and works for a political leader who wants to be prime minister, and he's basically telling you that since you disagree with his interpretation of the Constitution based on how you are treated, he can no longer support you. Is he God? Can he not err or make mistakes? Does everybody have to agree with his position? And if you disagree with his position, does that mean he cannot defend your rights? When I was a student at university, I came across a quotation from a French philosopher. It has been attributed to him. His name is Voltaire. And Voltaire said, and I quote, "I may disagree with what you say, but I will fight to the death for your right to say it." End of quote. In this statement by Voltaire, is embodied the kind of maturity that republicanism, a system of governance that emphasizes protection of inalienable or God-given rights and freedoms for all of the people, is all about. Because when as a government, when as a leader, you can defend and fight for the protection of the rights and freedoms, not only of those who support you, not only of those who love you and agree with you, but also, and I would dare say, especially of those who don't agree with you. When you can defend the rights of those who don't agree with you, then you are really mature for governance. Because in reality, we live in a society that makes use of the democratic method. People exercise their opinions, their freedom of agreement, disagreement, expression at the polls. And not everybody will vote for you. But when you begin to govern, you are to protect the rights and freedoms of all of the people, both those who voted for you as well as those who didn't vote for you. But if when people disagree with you, you basically throw away their right to the protection of their rights, you distance yourself, you no longer want to help them because they disagree with you, then that is very bad. And it shows that such a person is not fit to be advising political leaders, because it means that he would advise political leaders to what? To disassociate themselves or to remove themselves from helping people whose rights need to be defended just because that same person or those same people disagreed with you. That is not good enough. The Democratic Republican Party believes that in governance, you are to govern based on the philosophy of republicanism, a remaking of the public on the grounds of the protection of the inalienable rights and freedoms of all of the people, not just those whom you love or who love you and who support you, but especially those who don't support you, because that is the real true test of a good governor. That's the real true test of good government. That's the real true test of a good prime minister, when you could be mature enough to respect the rights of those who do not support you, who disagree vehemently with you even. My dear people, we're coming to the close of this program. In another program, I can give further explanations, or we could simply discuss further the tenets of good governance, because it is very worrying when in our country we have a government who has engaged in victimization, firing people or causing people to be put in an uncomfortable situation work-wise and so on because they disagree with them publicly. And then we have an opposition who does the same thing, because this is what Mr. Arnim Eustace did to me. I disagreed with his policy and I was put out of work. I was put on the breadline because of it. And now my rights, which lawyers were defending in the court, because they support Arnim Eustace and his party, they basically are saying they can't support me anymore in the pursuit of redress for the infringement of my rights. But I want you to know that this founder and leader of the Democratic Republican Party has felt the pain and the hurt that this kind of victimization brings from both sides. And I will not engage in that, because I know too well and fully well how painful it is and how it causes people to suffer. Poor people in this country. Remember that if you wish to contact me, you may call telephone number 528-1015. You can get forms to join the DRP, and you can look for us in your area soon, where we will be doing our membership drive, coming to you and asking for your support in joining the DRP and supporting a real, true, viable alternative to good governance in this country, an alternative who will truly show respect for all of your rights and freedoms, not just some of you, but all of you, regardless of where you choose to put your support. Because at the end of the day, you are all human beings and you have a right to disagree. You have the freedom to your opinion and your expressions, whether a government likes it or not. And in exercising those freedoms legitimately, the government is supposed to respect you. So remember that the DRP is here for you all, not just some not just those who say they like us, but also those who don't like us, but when we are governing, we will protect you. Because you're of ascension, you're a human being created by God and endowed with rights and freedoms. 528-1015 is the number to call. And until our next program, it's nice to be back with you. I have a lot of things to share with you, and I look forward. Bye-bye.